Hi, I'm Mark Peterson. I'm Professor of Marketing and Sustainable Business Practices at the University of Wyoming in the United States of America. I'm very pleased to be with you today. We're going to learn about macro marketing, specifically country development, and how entrepreneurs influence markets. We'll also take a look at getting published. What I'd like to do first in our first session here is to look at country development. We'll take interest in places like Africa, Albania, China, and other parts of the world. But what I want to call you to do as we're going into this session on country development is to think about your own country and its own sustainable development. Specifically those three dimensions of human development, environmental development, and also economic development. Let's begin. My home state in the U.S. is Wyoming. I call it the biggest W. I say that because it is larger than any other state that begins with the letter W. Wyoming is known for its energy economy, agriculture, ranching, and Yellowstone National Park. This photo was taken from my car window a few years ago in Yellowstone National Park. As you can see, the bison, it's our state image, and it is everywhere in certain parts of Yellowstone National Park. I'm currently the editor of the journal Macromarketing. The journal Macromarketing has been around for decades. It focuses on the interplay between marketing and society. Marketing legend Jag Sheth from Emory University in Atlanta is a co-editor of the Africa and Macromarketing special issue. In Washington, D.C., there's a park across from the White House. It's called Lafayette Park. At each corner of Lafayette Park is a statue representing someone that was very important to the United States during the Revolutionary War in the late 1700s. We didn't have skills, they came from other countries. In the 1800s, the U.S. was still a developing country. We had a terrible civil war. More than 600,000 died in that war. There are now estimates that it's 700,000. Many countries have had this experience too, including Spain, which lost 500,000 people in its civil war in the 1930s. In the western United States, in 1892, we were still a developing country. We had what was called the Johnson County War, where rich landowners hired thugs to systematically murder small ranchers. This movie, the Johnson County War, is about that.
I have an election coming up. This could damage me very badly if not handled carefully.
You seem, Governor, rather ignorant of the fundamentals that prompt what we are about to do. The people with money propose to drive out the peasants.
This is your unlucky day.
Three brothers.
They come to wipe us out.
Against an army.
This here's murder.
Folks up and down this valley got some serious trouble ahead.
Tonight,
I think it's time we do something about it.
justice knows no boundaries.
I'm so afraid he's gonna kill you.
From the creator of Lonesome Dove comes a television event based on a true story.
Vengeance would not be out of place. Not anymore.
Tom Berenger, Luke Perry, Rachel Ward, and Burt Reynolds. Johnson County War.
Country development and political violence seem to go hand in hand all over the world. As you can see on this map, the darker colors represent more violence and terrorism. This is a schematic diagram of country development and quality of life. On the left, you see macro factors: government, environment, population, the economy, political situation. The top, best practices. In the middle, you see the catalytic institutions of government, the NGO, and business. And at the right of that, you see consumers and what they're doing in marketplaces. All that moves up to consumption demand and eventually to consumer well-being and quality of life. One of the fascinating places on the planet these days is Africa. Africa has posted some remarkable economic growth in recent years, and it is also projected to have a very impressive population growth in the coming years, the only continent expected to actually grow in population. Here's your opportunity to review Africa geography by country. The different labor sectors for a country represent economic development. On the left, you see the U.S., almost 80% is in the service sector. You look at Albania and China, they have more even distribution across farms, industry, and services. Then you look at a country like Ethiopia, with 85% of the workforce working in the agricultural sector. If 2 out of 3 people in the sub-Saharan Africa lack electricity, that's an opportunity. Entrepreneurs, macro-marketers need to view it that way. The British-based company Box has been bringing solar power to remote regions of Africa without electricity. Having solar power means that sewing machines can run by electricity. This means more businesses can be operating. Solar power also means that televisions can run. I love this picture. What it shows is the sewing machine over there on the right, television operating, and things going on just as they were before. Those chickens probably take out a lot of bugs there on the floor. Let's talk about sustainable development in Africa. We're talking about people, planet, and profit dimensions of development. Our study will be using the Sustainable Society Index that's produced by the Sustainable Society Foundation that's based in Holland. 3 dimensions here: economic well-being, environmental well-being, and human well-being. As you can see on this slide, on the right, you can see the actual variables that are used to assess the different components of well-being. In the middle, you can see the themes for these items, such as basic needs, personal development and health, all the way down to transition in the economy for economic well-being. We'll compare countries such as Albania, all of Africa, non-African developing countries, and developed countries here on these 3 dimensions. It seems like the developed countries are doing well in human development, as well as Albania, but less well on environmental well-being. In terms of economic well-being, the developed countries lead the rest. For overall sustainability scores, we're actually adding these scores for each dimension here. What we see is that Africa trails the others. The developed countries have the best sustainability, and the non-African developing countries and Albania look to be tied. In this spider graph, you can compare Africa and the rest of the world on the 21 dimensions of the Sustainable Society Index. What you see here is on the right side, the rest of the world outpaces Africa. The further away you are from the center, the better you're performing. But it looks like Africa, coming up at 6 to maybe 8 o'clock positions on the clock, are doing better than the rest of the world. Then when you get to the economy, Africa then trails the rest of the world on most dimensions. When our study does a comparison using a t-test, we see that the rest of the world does better on a healthy life than does Africa on the left. However, when we do another t-test, comparing Africa and the other developing countries on renewable energy, we see that Africa is doing better in terms of acquiring and deploying renewable energy. Now we'll look at Africa and the different sections of Africa according to the United Nations geo-scheme for the 5 regions of Africa. In this spider graph, you can see how the regions of Africa compare on the 21 dimensions. In this spider graph, you see the regions of the world on well-being. What you can see in this, at 1 o'clock, you see the Europe West with the highest human well-being, the lowest environmental well-being scores. You compare that with Africa East, which has the best score on environmental well-being, but the worst on the human well-being. In our last graph, you see the sustainability in regions of the world rendered in bar chart form. Here you can see that the regions of Africa are mostly at the bottom compared to the others, European North, European West, coming into the top. But it does show that there is some spread and dispersion. Africa East appears to be climbing there toward the middle of the chart. But a good thing to remember about Africa is that in certain events, it does well. It's the winner. In conclusion, Africa does well in the environment dimensions. Greenhouse gas emissions, consumption rates, energy use, all those are more favorable to the environment there. because of lack of economic development. Africa does lag in human development, but North Africa is an exception to this. A problem for all countries, but especially developing countries, is corruption. Diverting resources or using power for the wrong ends. These data are from the Transparency International NGO based in Berlin. Surprising results here with regards to the percentage of people who report having paid bribes to different individuals in these different sectors of society in the last 12 months. Not surprisingly, the impact of corruption hits the most poor the worst. In a country like Sierra Leone in West Africa, it's estimated that 13% of the income of people are paid in bribes. So how does Spain do on the Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index in 2018? We can see here that it comes in at 47th in rank. The United States came in at 25th, so the higher ranked you are, the better. But I think what it shows is that there's ways to go for both Spain and the United States in terms of eliminating corruption from its society. Charles Slater was an academic at the University of Colorado in the United States when he began the Macromarketing seminar. He was a pioneer in our field, but his real focus and interest was country development. He did research in South America as well as Africa. Charles Slater's life in the 1930s growing up in the United States was characterized by one of those of people living in developing countries. It was poverty, uncertainty. His parents experienced healthcare problems. They were unable to take care of him. He was in and out of foster homes, and he also served in World War II, and he saw the devastation of modern warfare. But yet he came out of that experience and had a heart for people and understanding better ways for countries to develop themselves. Some of the biggest names in marketing have published in the Journal of Macromarketing and would consider themselves macro marketers. Philip Kotler at Northwestern University, Bob Lush, who was at the University of Arizona until his death in 2017, and Russell Belk, who's at York University in Canada. Macro marketers share an interest in seeing the world get better. Charles Slater, Christine Domingan from Ireland, Anne-Marie Kennedy in the middle of the photos here from New Zealand, Stephanie Oneto from my home university in Wyoming, and also Joe Privati from Australia. We do hope you join us as macro marketers. Now, at the conclusion of this session, what I'd like you to do is to consider the Sustainable Society Foundation and their Sustainable Society Index. If you would go to www.ssifindex.com, that's ssifindex.com, you can click on Results, the ranking of all countries, and download an Excel spreadsheet. What I'd like you to do is to look for Spain and how it does on the 3 dimensions of these rankings. Also, your home country and how it compares. So before you do that, I'd like you to think about which dimension you think your country will do best, and then go download the data and look at it, and then see how your country's rankings fare with the ones that you had thought they would do. Think also about what challenges lie ahead for sustainable development in your country. Discuss these with your neighbors now.